I spilled salsa on my shirt at dinner apparently and didn't notice it until we actually went live. I'm actually a terrible keyboard player. That's my boys like playing. So I primarily have always used it to tune instruments or like messing around or drum beats and stuff like that. Not actually like playing piano. My piano skills are pretty limited. All right, let's get this fun party started, people. Welcome to the Overreaction Sunday show. We're actually doing this on a Sunday for once because we've been on the road, or I've been on the road, or whatever. But trying to do this every week after every football game, good, bad, whatever. Make sure you smash the like button up, down, wherever it is on your thing, and tell your friends. And be sure to join us whenever we do these things because it helps me out, helps bring more people on the site, helps grow our business. So, and obviously Georgia Tech has a lot of need for growing the fan base these days. I'll jump right into the questions because I think that's kind of the way to go with this. But I'll answer this one first. So somebody asked me, is there any discrepancy between your tweet saying he has not lost confidence in the staff? People read way too much into that stuff. I didn't ask him about that, but a more junior reporter did during the media session. I knew what his answer was going to be. He wasn't going to tell us he was firing anyone or making any rash decision in the moment immediately following an embarrassing home loss. Brian was going to go home and think about it and evaluate everything. And he made a point of saying that kind of further down the line. I took the initial thing that he said and put it out there because I thought it was appropriate given the tenor of what was going on social media. But I knew that at best the rope was pretty thin heading into a week away from a bye week. It reminded me very much of the 2012 season when or 13, whatever it was, the 1 year Al Grove got fired mid-season. Very much that vibe of that Middle Tennessee game a few years ago. Hopefully next week is not the Miami game that Georgia Tech played after that. That was pretty awful. But I can remember Paul Johnson and Dan Radakovich barely having a discussion about which one would get the pleasure of firing Al Grove. So
that's what's going on. We'll jump in. I'll jump in with the questions from the message board first, and then we'll take some in the chat as well as we go along. The first one is, are people overreacting? Yes and no. This is an embarrassing loss and a long sequence of embarrassing losses throughout Georgia Tech history in these types of games. So this is far from a unique circumstance. I laid out a few of the other ones. Jeff Collins had a lot of them. Paul Johnson had a couple, particularly the Independence Bowl and then the sign stealing game with Middle Tennessee. But I think the venom at which people reacted was overreacting. The tenor of people like turning on Brent Key before he's had time for literally the paint in his office that just got all redone to dry. Like, there's a lot that needs to be done behind the scenes. The program was in a terrible spot that Jeff Collins left it in. And Jay Batt inherited a very difficult situation. And those guys are trying to fix it each in their own way. You know, Brent's got to have a little bit of leeway here to do his job. Obviously, like I said, he'd fire anyone if he thought it would help them win football games. And that came to fruition today with him, demoting Andrew Thacker to a safeties coach, I guess, and then promoting Kevin Shearer to the play caller. I'm not surprised by either of these events. I felt like Thacker, that was sort of a thin line of great performance, but just never was totally inspired by what I saw defensively from them. It always seemed a little shaky. And so I'm not shocked at what happened. Andrew is a tremendous person. I really like him. We've become friends. Like, I have a good relationship with the guy. I wish him nothing but the best. This is the business, and it's tough. And I had a lot of other coaches I know call me today just to kind of wanted to talk about it. Most of them I couldn't actually talk to. But it was like, this is the business they're in, and it's cutthroat. And Brent's in a position where he doesn't have 4 years to screw around and rebuild this thing. He's on a pretty tight timeline to get it going, where Jay Batt's going to be the one making the call. So I think that, I think something had to be done. That the defenses look disinterested and reacting slowly and not playing well and all of those things. And I don't know how you justify that. So he had to go. He was the leadership piece of that. When something fails like that, the leader of it is always going to be the person ultimately held responsible, whether it's in my business, your business, or your bosses or whoever is in charge. As you go up the line, we're all responsible for things. So I thought it was the venom in which people reacted. And I had to ban some people and delete a lot of posts and kind of stay off some social media stuff just because people were being way over the top with how bad they thought it was. It wasn't the Citadel game, which I think to me is the high water mark for mediocrity at Georgia Tech. That was a pretty damn mediocre game. Like, I thought that they were past this point. I think Brent thought they were past this point of playing games like that, and they clearly are not. And looked like it reminded me of really the Georgia Tech game in 2010 when they went up to Lawrence, Kansas, rolled their helmets out and thought they'd beat the Jayhawks and lost, and set up sort of a domino effect that torpedoed that season for them. And we see this across college football. It's not unique to Georgia Tech. It's not unique to coaching changes. There are a lot of programs that deal with this stuff, especially when you've been down and you're not like at the highest point of maybe your talent threshold and talent and development threshold. So we'll see. What's going on with the defense? Obviously, that's kind of been addressed. It looked like there were once again issues signaling in defensive play calls and getting players lined up before the snap. We've seen the same thing in the past handful of years. Is Thacker hesitant on making calls, or there's another issue at play here? I think they've always seemed to have issues getting lined up on defense, and this was an issue my first year on the beat and it's part of why Dave Womack got fired. And one of the things I brought up in my Q's take today, I talked about sort of the similarities I saw here and there, where you saw the head coach chewing out his defensive coordinator, even though Key does a good job of not being as demonstrative as Paul Johnson doing it. And the just disconnect and getting just the players lined up and looking confident when they're executing the defense, and then guys looking like they're playing with effort, like their hair's on fire. That just wasn't there, and that was the way they played last year at the end of the year, and that's why they won games. And this looked like the defense from the beginning of last year, and that was not the expectation I think anyone had, even with the linebacker issues they've had. There's too much talent, especially in the back end of that defense, to play like that. I think the defensive lines played better. They are missing a dynamic pass rusher piece. Like they needed a Keon White or a healthy Sylvain or someone there, but that's not enough to make this whole thing kind of unravel. People are literally asking Key why he isn't getting us tough questions. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't understand what the point of that was. Brent Key walked up and said, "It's all my fault." And then we asked him questions regarding how do you fix it? Or at least that was my line of questioning. Me going up there and saying, "Hey, buddy, you suck today." Like, what does that accomplish other than making some keyboard warrior feel good about themselves? It does nothing. You're not going to elicit a response. You're probably going to get him to blow up unreasonably. And it just doesn't accomplish much. Like, it's not my job to be standoffish with Brent Key. This is his first year on the job. He's not, in year 10 and they're winning 5 games a year or something. Like, that is a different animal than a guy who just became the head coach. And so show some respect. Like, show some respect as fans, too. Like, that's, like, the game was unacceptable, but whatever. If we finish the season with 3 or 4 wins, does that hurt our recruiting enough to become difficult to get the guys on board that we need to consistently win a bowl team? I feel like that's part of what happened to Scooter, or people on the board called Jeff Collins Scooter. No, I don't think that's what happened to Jeff Collins. I think Jeff Collins couldn't get the kids he needed to get. And I think they got hurt by COVID. They were not really totally up and running the way they should have been. They took some bad reaches. Like did some star chasing. They did some weird things in their recruitment, passing over guys that were probably better and ready to go to try to chase after Mr. 4-star. They were very concerned with where they fit in the rankings. I think Brent could give 2 craps about that. Most good coaches I know don't really care about it. They're not trying to win the offseason national championship. They're trying to win championships on the field. So, you look at the best player. Who's the best player in the last 9 classes? A guy we had as 2 stars. Other people had him at a low 3-star, Eric Singleton Jr. Best player they signed in the last class. Like, it doesn't take – you don't have to sign a team of 5-star guys. Like, yes, there are the Calvin Johnsons. There's a Jahmyr Gibbs every once in a while. Like, those guys are generational every 20 years. But the bulk of your guys are going to be guys you develop, especially a place like Georgia Tech. It's going to be more of a 3-star guy that you've turned into a 4-star level player, 5-star level player. It's not, I'm going to go sign 5 Rivals 100 players and stuff. That's not happening. Like, even if Deion Sanders were here, which is the wet dream of a lot of people on the message board, I think it would be hard to do that. Whose responsibility is it for to make sure the players aren't looking over teams? If it's coaches, is there anything they can actually do about it? Is they're not the ones playing the games? If it's team leaders, do they have any locker room leaders? Is that part of the issue? I think there is a little bit of a leadership vacuum. I think this happens a lot when you have changes in teams and and they haven't had a quarterback leader in the locker room since Taquan Marshall. That's a guy that's a vocal leader that's playing and starting. You had Zach Pyron kind of trying to take that, but he didn't win the job, so that's hard. It was in a competition. Haynes King is new to the program and kind of learning his way. And defensively, there's not a guy like that with that personality on the side of the ball that I see. And it certainly doesn't come across that way when you talk to the players that there's anyone. And it was one of the things Paul Maiola talked about yesterday was that he feels like he has to say something because there's no one kind of stepping up on that side of the ball. The guys who would just don't have those personalities. Miles Brooks, not really like that kind of personality. Miles Sims, certainly not. Those are your 2 most experienced guys. Jalen King's kind of not a super vocal guy. Like, those are your veteran leaders on your defense, and they're not they're not a guy that's going to get in someone's face and tell them they're screwing up or whatever. And I think that's gets into a little bit of the persona of some of the kids at Georgia Tech recruits too. Like that, um, they don't sometimes have those alpha personalities for whatever reason. If what if any positives can be taken away from that loss to Bowling Green? I mean, it's good to see Don Blaylock catch some balls. Hey, I don't think there are a lot. I think if this defensive coordinator change ends up working like it did in the year they fired out Grow and they go in and play an ACC championship or something weird like that that I wouldn't expect, yeah, that does. Or if they go bowl game, like somehow they're gonna have to upset somebody now to get there. But say they go to a bowl game, then it's accomplished the goal of making that change in the season. Why can't we run block? BG can, and they pushed us around. It seems like P5 should be able to get some push. The run blocking is the most puzzling thing to me because that is very much about physical strength and effort. And they cannot block at all on the inside. And I don't know why that is. Like, there's no running lane. Like, you could have, you would need Barry Sanders to be able to bump it outside. Like, that's how little room. That's why Jamal Haynes is playing so much because he can bump it out. He just doesn't have the ability to break a lot of tackles. He's just not big enough and strong enough to do that physically. Because there was a play where he ran left off the tackle. They got him on a shoestring. If he breaks that tackle, that's probably a 60-yard or a touchdown. So they're not overly talented at running back at the moment in terms of having a true physical running back. There's no Jordan Mason. There's no Dedrick Mills. There's no John Dwyer. There's no Tashard Choice. There's none of those guys on the team right now. And that's a failure in recruiting by the previous guy. And so you got to fix it through recruiting. Why does it feel like Tech has a much wider spectrum of performances than any other P5 team over the past few years? We beat UNC multiple times and get stomped by lesser talented teams over and over. It was a problem going all the way back to even during PJ's era. There were some games where they play up and down a little bit. And I don't know why that is. And it is very interesting. And we do see it with some other programs. I'm trying to think of one. Like Auburn is a great example. Auburn played Georgia to the wire the other day, right? And they barely beat a terrible Cal team on the road. There's in a really horrendous game they should have lost. So, like, I don't know. I mean, Florida State's been wild like that the last few years. They're much better this year, but they've been up and down quite a bit. Notre Dame seems to certainly be up and down right now with Marcus Freeman. I don't know. Why do we continue to see a lot of 7 and 13 on the field at linebacker? What will it take to get the younger guys a shot? I'm not sure they can be worse. I don't get it either. When I watch them trot that combo out to start the game, I just don't get it. Like, they haven't played well all year together on the field. Tatum actually played okay yesterday, but Paul is not a Mike linebacker. Like, stop trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Like, those two play the same position. Let them play the same position. Find something else. Like, Kyle Eifert has played a little bit better. He's physically more limited and occasionally takes some bad angles, but he's not afraid to make contact. Dre White will give you as much as he can physically. And then play Jacob Cruz, play somebody else, try something. Like Braylon Oliver, they tried. He had a terrible game. His tackling was quite bad on Saturday. But just try some other stuff. Like, that's something that I've been really found mind-boggling. Were the coaches overlooking Bowling Green? I don't know. There was something that I found a little off-putting in the media session last week where they talked about resting some guys from Miami. And I kind of thought that you're not in a position to rest anyone right now, that you need to win every single game. That sort of is the antithesis. Now, those guys might be hurt more than they're letting on. And obviously, Chase Lane wasn't dressed at all. Neither was Jordan. So maybe that's it. I mean, you played yesterday without a starting wide receiver, without your starting right tackle. And really, like Connor Scaglione had a rough day. Like, you could have maybe moved Jordan Williams in. You could have, if Jakai was struggling, move him in. I don't know. I haven't broken all that down enough yet to have a true opinion of it. Last week, all three phases played well. Yesterday, all three stunk. Played soft on D. I assume we'll cover this. Or do you start with the many problems arising after week one? I think tackling is the base fundamental of all of this. If you go back and watch the game, like go back and watch this game again, or please don't. I'm not going to. If you see where the initial contact is on a lot of the run plays that ended up being converted on third downs, when it kind of looked like Bowling Green was laying up a little bit, the initial contact was often at the line of scrimmage or like maybe 2-3 yards downfield. And if that person makes that tackle on I think his name was Stewart, they punt. They punt. You'll probably stop 3 touchdowns by just if the first person makes a tackle and then they rally to the ball. What the team did a good job of last year and in the past when they played well is the initial contact happens and then everyone kind of converged on the ball. And that just hasn't been happening at all. The guys are just kind of going for it. And I don't understand what that's about. It's just kind of piss poor defense and piss poor tackling. Why does a head coach who speaks about building a tough culture oversee and allow his defense to be ranked 128th in the country in rushing defense without doing anything about it? He did something about it, so let's relax. How many P580s would trade coaching staffs with Jay Battery now? Pretty sure the guy at Stanford would after they lost to the team that they hired the coach from. That was an FCS school. When the core problems of our team seem to be leadership and toughness on the field, do you think King has checked that box so far this year? Haynes King, I assume you're talking about. Haynes King's definitely a tough kid. I don't think he likes to run the football in the way that they need to run the football right now. I think he's shown when he's willing to run, they're able to kind of open more things up offensively, but most of those seem to be end of half situations or panic scoring situations. We'll see what happens. Zach, the guy mentioned Zach Pyron. Pyron's was overly fearless and got himself hurt actually playing that way, but that's how that dude plays. So, any sense of the young linebackers who might get a shot? They're burning Jacob Cruz's shirt right now. Akari Ashley and Ashton Heflin were not dressed, so I'm going to guess that they are not going to play. So I don't know. Someone mentioned this, and I haven't put the PFF up yet, but the grades were like extremely high, like to the point where I kind of want to email my contact there to ask them to regrade the game because I do not agree with their grading. It's the first time I felt really kind of strongly about like how much of a disconnect between what I saw and really what other people saw and the PFF numbers. So we'll see. Has Dante fallen off that far off the depth chart? It seems like Cooley hasn't been able to get anything going since he got hit hard at Ole Miss. Dante's been injured. He was out with an injury. They've been trying to come back. He is doing his best to try to play. They're trying to limit his reps. He got in at the end of the game. I thought he looked better. Hopefully that carries over. They need someone like Dante that can run hard and move the sticks and push a pile a little bit. Are we not talking enough about the Tillman being inadequate enough? Loved him as a player, but the corners and safeties regressed significantly. He has to be a part of that. Um, I've been clear that the secondary play is the most discouraging piece of all of this because they should be the best part of this team and they're not. And I don't understand the rotations. They play, so they open up the game and they get a stop, and then they swap out all like three of the DBs on the next drive. And like just stuff like that doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand the substitution patterns that they're not developing guys because they're not playing anyone other than sort of the core guys. Like they're burning Seymour's shirt. He hasn't played like at all in a defensive snap of consequence. Sarah Bryant was not dressed on Saturday, but like why haven't we seen him? He's not afraid to tackle people. I feel like there's this very, very intense like fear of playing certain guys, and I don't get it. How many more years are needed in the transition from the triple option? I got a text from a former Georgia Tech assistant coach today. It said, "Well, at least they're not going to blame Paul Johnson for this loss to Bowling Green." Someone's asking what happened on the punt. I just saw like the TV replay and walk over and look at it, and it looked like the up back or whatever. I forget what the positions are called in punt team, but it looked like they were too close together and it hit him the shoulder. Like I didn't know if they should have been further apart or it was just a bad snap. I'm not really sure. Not taking the 10-second runoff after the sack at the end of the first half. They ended up taking a knee, but more on decision. But yeah, I don't know. It's that Thacker got advice from Jeff Collins. I'm not touching that. Some of this has already happened because a lot of these questions were before. With the change in DC, do you think there'll be any schematic changes or play calling, or what is Shearer known to be doing in the past? I haven't studied Kevin Shearer. I haven't studied Kevin Shearer's defenses at Tennessee, so I don't know what, or South Alabama. I think was the other place he was DC. I don't know what his schematically how he rolls. There's only so much you can do in a game week. The bye week would be going into, I guess it's Boston College. Is that right? I haven't flipped my calendar in front of me, but I think that's the next game after that. That would be when you would do like some overhaul stuff. I think this week you try to figure out a way to bodge a game plan together with what's already installed. Someone's asking about guys in the locker room. Thought we had it locked up at halftime against Louisville and overlooked BG. How's that mindset allowed? That is a mindset across college sports. It is not unique to Georgia Tech. Go flip on the UCF Baylor game from Saturday too. You'll see something far worse than what happened, and even in Bobby Dodd Stadium, they were up 35-3 maybe, and lost. 26 points in the fourth quarter, and missed a game-winning field goal on top of it in a game they were comfortably ahead. That's Gus Bus coaching for you. Do you think hit the portal hard on the defensive side of the ball? Yeah, they tried, man. Like they've been trying to find guys. It's hard. You need a lot of money to pick. A defensive version of Keon Coleman's the guy like Tavin because he's been maybe one of the most impactful guys. Him and Sam Hartman probably in college football right now with the portal and Keon Coleman like to get a dude like that's probably like half of Georgia Tech's NIL budget total. So yeah, I think you need some money to make some of those things happen. How's my blood pressure? It was not great last night. I did not sleep very much last night. I actually sweated somehow through my pillow, which I never do, and just tossed and turned all night. It was real bad. I was pretty frustrated with how people were somehow viewing as um, on me that they lost the football game and that I thought they should have won it. Like I said that they should have won the game. I don't understand where the disconnect was, and people thought I was spinning for Brent. I didn't spin anything. It was a total disaster, and everything I wrote said it was a total disaster. I just said that Bowling Green was not the Citadel, and people were upset about that for some reason. Bowling Green might win the damn MAC. They might go to a bowl game. I don't know. They're not. They're not the worst team that I've seen Georgia Tech lose to in my time covering them. That's what I'd say. Does the team have any leaders, players? I think that's probably an issue on some level. That's I don't know. I didn't see anyone like gather everyone on the sideline and be like, "Hey, dudes, let's get our crap together. Like, let's go kick some butt, whatever." There was none of that going on from the players, and I found that a little bit troubling. And that was something that happened last year in particular. Question might take some setup, as others noted. I'll admit it. They felt like they're overlooking Bowling Green. How does a game get overlooked? Is it down to coaches not running practice aggressively? Do players pay less attention? Forget what to do on the field. Players play relaxed, sleep hungover, etc., etc. Asking because my expectation would be if you take someone seriously, you have to start focusing. Brent said they had a fine week of practice, and it was interesting because they had a terrible week before the Wake Forest game, and then went out and drilled Wake Forest. So I found that fascinating. That was what was encouraging me because my initial reaction was this felt like a trap. And as Brent seemed confident going into the game, that made me feel confident about picking the score and expecting it to not be what these games have been the last 5-6 years. So, yeah. Why were we so inconsistent on offense? Sometimes like we will never be stopped, like in the beginning of the game, and then long stretches where they get a first down. Can't run the football, man. Like if you can't run the football and you are one dimensional, and it's very easy to stop it unless you're running Mike Leach's spread and you're running a bunch of stuff over the middle. And that's something else that we haven't seen a lot of is there's a lot of stuff in Buster's playbook we actually haven't seen. A lot of over middle things, crossing routes. The tight ends were sort of non-existent other than the one post throw to Benson that was overthrown. Just a lot of forcing the ball outside to Singleton and Blaylock and kind of looking downfield, not checking down to guys. There was another play that, and Haynes likes to take those shots, and that's his personality, but he's got to also check down sometimes. And people think I'm too hard on him or whatever, but I look at him as a guy who's graduated from college and has played a lot of quarterback, even though he's missed, part of a season. He's not like Zach Pyron last year, who was a high school kid playing in college. Like my expectations are much higher for that dude if he's playing than even what I would expect from Zach Pyron. We talk about recruits seeing playing time and opportunity to watch games. The recruits also take into account what seems to be a lack of development of players from the respective coaches. Or is that all chalked up to individual athletes and I'm going to set the world on fire mindset? It's very variable on players. Most of the players think they're better than the guys playing on the team pretty much anywhere other than like Alabama or Georgia. Like they just, like if you talk to enough of these kids, they all feel that way. Where would the tech program be right now if John Heisman's wife had not divorced him? Is that why Heisman left? I don't even remember that story. The situation reminds me of people who felt like he shouldn't get the head coaching job because his unit O-line was the worst on the team during the Collins era. You debunked that multiple times by showing the personnel problems, recruiting misses, mistakes, plus injuries were the root of the O-line problems and it had unfolded over a multi-year period. It seems like the linebacker play has been the weak spot of the year. Is that another case of personnel problems? So let's go back. I can go back and walk you through the linebacker thing because that one's like super obvious to me. Yeah, they have stunk at linebacker recruiting in terms of turning guys into starter level players. Trinelius Tatum is the only guy that this anyone post Paul Johnson recruited has turned into a starting linebacker at Georgia Tech. Charlie Thomas was starting or playing. Was he starting? I guess he was starting at outside linebacker for Paul's last season. Their first year, they signed Kendall Young, who was a like defensive end, outside linebacker type that had no business being signed, had academic issues. They signed Cornelius Evans, who transferred out of the program immediately. Those two were Jeff Collins signings. They were not guys that they inherited. In 2020, they signed Katavian Franks, who was a huge bust for them. They signed Tyson Miguez, who's never sniffed the field for whatever reason on defense and had injury problems. I really like Tyson. I don't understand why he can't play. I assume that he just does not perform well in practice or something because they haven't even given him a shot. He just plays on special teams. In 21, I think that's when they took Tatum, right? Yeah. So Trent Tatum's the only linebacker from that group that played. 22, they added Kyle Eford, who's playing now a lot. That's it. The other one was Demetrius Knight, who they converted the first year. He was signed as a quarterback. They turned him into a linebacker. He was okay. They just haven't signed enough dudes. It's the same problem as the offensive line, and it's why they fixed the defensive line. They fixed the defensive line. They signed a crap ton of defensive linemen, and then they let it sort itself out. Like they signed so many dudes, and they all sorted it out, and you ended up finding Sylvain and Kyle Kennard and Josh Robinson. Noah Collins not really playing right now, but and then signing a Horace Lockett and developing Jason Moore as a walk-on. Those things, like they fixed the defensive line that way. The linebacker has not been that way at all. They played David Curry forever, way more than he should ever play. They overplayed Charlie Thomas, played him too much, and didn't develop anyone behind him. Didn't sign anyone behind him, and I think that's like the biggest thing that's killing them right now. The linebacker play sucks, and it's not Kevin Shearer's fault. I think if he and I can't, it's not a situation where you could go ask Kevin Shearer like his honest opinion. I guarantee you, I know what his honest opinion is about because I had a private conversation with him about it. But they lack Jimmys and Joes at linebacker, and they took like some used cars to. No offense to those guys, they're all great dudes, but they took guys that had a lot of miles on them, like a car with 200,000 miles on them, and tried to find a way to make it your daily commute driver. That doesn't work, and it was a Band-Aid they were hoping to get through the year with. You had Paul Maiola's had 2 Achilles. You had Dre White, who has pretty serious wrist issues. You have Braylon Oliver's had just has a ton of miles on him playing. Has played a ton of football. And they tried to come up with a group of linebackers hoping that Cornelius Tatum would turn into Charlie Thomas too. And Trent has not played anywhere near that level. And so that's why the linebacker play sucks. The safety and the corner positions, they recruited way more guys and had sort of sorted out, though they've missed on some corners too. I think the corner position hasn't been anywhere near where it should be. But, they lived on Trey Swilling and Zamari Walton for a long time. Miles Sims developed into an okay corner. He's regressed a little bit. And, Kenan Johnson's okay. I don't understand their love affair with him because I don't think he's a guy who should play every snap of a game, but he's okay. Why don't you see Kenyatta? Why don't you see Rod Shelley? They're just not developing any depth. And it's going to be a continual problem. It's the same thing at safety now. They find a couple of guys and they just ride them to death. And when those guys get hurt, you have a huge fall off. It's not the offensive line. You don't need to play 5-6 guys. You need to play for 5 positions on the offensive line. With anywhere on the defense, you should be too deep and be able to flex and put people in and not have a huge fall off. And they don't have that. And it is a perpetual problem, especially if you have an offense that's inefficient at times and you're on the field a lot. During the game, Key seems cool, calm, and collected, whether going great or terrible. I'm assuming he's keeping a level head, not letting his emotions feed into his decision making. I'm assuming he's chewing out people on the headset, even though you don't see him in Thacker's face or player's face. Would you agree with this hot take? No, because I've seen him chew people out. He chewed probably all of Andrew Thacker's butt. There's probably nothing left but bone back there. Like, he has chewed a lot of people. I've seen him yelling at the offensive dudes. Like, Brent is not a calm guy. When they do that cut where he's standing watching the game, yeah, he's calm because there's nothing he can do in that moment to do a damn thing. But he is not like a chilled out, like Jeff Collins dude he is much more like Paul Johnson. He's just not grabbing people's face masks and screaming at them. Brent is far the furthest thing from a calm coach. And I've seen him blow up at people and all that stuff. And, everyone on here sat on the East End, the East stands, saw him light Thacker on fire during the game on Saturday. A bunch of people that have all texted me the same story about what happened during the game. All right, let's go and jump back into the chat questions here as we enter the 40-minute mark. What are your expectations of Thacker for the rest of the season now that while he's looking for a new job? Just keep parking him somewhere, expecting him to provide value at all. I don't know. It was interesting that they didn't make him like linebackers coach. They made him safeties coach. He was helping with the safeties last year and they played better. I don't know if that's why they played better or not or what. And Jason Seymour took over the linebackers last year. I don't know. I mean, we're going to, I guess we'll find out. I'm not texting Brent asking him about this stuff or calling him or whatever. We'll find out on Tuesday in the presser. I think that's the appropriate way to do this. When someone gets fired like this, man, it's tough. Like, and we know all these people. I know Brent. I know his relationship with Thacker. I know Thacker really well. Great guys. Like, this is the last thing that Brent wanted to have happen. He wanted to see this guy have success, but at the end of the day, you're judged by the product you put on the field. And, Buster's the same way, right? If the offense was scoring 10 points a game, Buster's probably be demoted too, and Chris Winkie would be calling plays right now. So that's just the nature of the beast, man. This is a very year-to-year business now. People don't get 5 years to rebuild something. People don't get years and years to fix it. What Dave Clawson did at Wake Forest won't happen at 90% of places. It took Dave 4 years of redshirting everyone on his team and all that stuff to win. Now he's in this perpetual situation where he can't get them probably past 6-7 wins a year now because they don't have enough NIL money and he can't redshirt everybody and sit on them anymore because they're going to just leave to Notre Dame or some other place that pays a lot of money. That's why Brent's more active in playing freshmen now too. Like, you can't just sit on a guy because they could just leave as soon as they graduate too. Thacker was demoted. Do you think it's more of a development of the players by the position coach, short leash, Tillman Shearer? I think all the defensive guys are, except for maybe Marco Coleman, are on a short leash. I think that's the nature of this business in general. It's beyond even just, their positions and whatever. I think that Brent Key wants to win, man. He wants to be the head coach at Georgia Tech for the next 20 years. That would be his dream. And so he's going to do whatever it takes to get there, right? Like, and everyone's a little more cutthroat. I'm not built like that, so I don't run things like that in my business. I'm not one of those people that will railroad, say Russell, my boy Russell's having personal problems. I'm not going to be like blowing Russell up because he's maybe slacking on what he's doing at the time. Like, we all go through stuff, but in the coaching business, you don't have that luxury. You don't have the luxury of having a personal life, period. And you don't have the luxury of time. And so it has to be handled differently. And Andrew Thacker is a very sharp defensive guy. He knows a lot about football. He's really interesting to talk to about football. Very, very successful recruiter. Really good dude. It didn't work out. My guess is he'll be gone at the end of the season, on to some other job. And, what happens with Kevin Shearer, I think, will depend on how he can motivate and get this team to execute a game plan to get off the field on third down and to stop giving up explosive plays and not have the number 131 rush defense or whatever it is. Do you feel like this group, players, coaches, are more like a Wake Forest game or the BG game? Obviously, I thought they were like the Wake Forest game, and I think you have seen glimpses of that team throughout the season. You saw it in the second quarter of the Louisville game. You saw it at the first half of the Ole Miss game. You saw it even at the beginning of the Bowling Green game. The first three series, the first two offensive series and Bowling Green's first series, really even the second one where they should have got off the field. If they just execute and tackle guys on defense, they get off the field, the offense can put more pressure on things. Instead, what happens is they seem to just kind of ebb and flow with the confidence of either side of the ball. That seems to be, this was something that happened a lot with Jeff Collins too. The team played up and down based on how successful one side of the ball was or the other. And the defense would eventually, as Jeff liked to put it, let go of the rope when the offense was struggling because the offense was so bad all those years. There's just a lot of systemic issues that are going to take time to sort out too. Like they're lacking in some skill positions. They're lacking, they're still, the offensive line's still really young. I mean, you have, Joe Fusel and Jakai Leftwich and Ethan McKinney, who are, first, second year starters now. Like they're not all redshirt senior guys. Like there's a lot of like stuff still kind of bubbling and a lot of player development. I think that they were behind on strength and conditioning with having the guys spraying oil on them to look good in photos instead of actually having them like get stronger and tougher. Can you speculate on potential? Hold on a second. What's the deal with the damn tackling? It's just poor tackling, and if they tackle okay, they win that game pretty easily because Bowling Green would have been stopped like on most of their drives. I think they had maybe one drive where it wasn't a broken tackle on a third down or something that they scored on. Might have been the short field one off because that was the one I think where the guy made the one-handed catch in the end zone. Yeah, there was like maybe one drive that they had where they didn't have a chance to get off the field easily. I talked about Tyson Miguez. Why are there other coaches that you can't talk to? The defensive coordinators chose, or an offensive coordinator chose to not really want to do media this year because of time constraints with the window that we have to talk to them. And Brent was fine with doing that because I think he just wants them to talk in the off season. Not my call. Didn't push the issue with anyone at GT because I didn't feel like it was worth pushing it. Can you speculate on potential depth chart and personnel changes? I don't think they're going to change a whole lot in the short term. I don't know what it'll look like in the longer term. We'll see. Best guess is to when the program turns around, they can return to a bowl game. Could happen this year. May happen in 2 years. Might not happen with this group. Could happen, like I said, now or next year. Like, I don't know. This is a team capable of beating most teams they play this year on the schedule. Even Georgia looks very beatable. Auburn's awful, and they should have beat them. Even my most ardent UGA friend that I went to school with texted me today and said that they should have lost. Jamal came out of the game with an apparent injury. I didn't see that, so I don't know. Dante, that was around the time I guess Dante must have gone into the game, so I don't know what that was about. You've often stated how good Thacker was, and we were previously so bad because Jeff was meddling and not because Thacker was in over his head. Your tenor has changed. Yeah, they're not executing the defense. I didn't think there was necessarily anything wrong with what they called. You got to tackle people to the ground, man. You got to not hold them on third down away from where the play is. Like they had a defensive holding extended a drive. They had a face mask penalty that extended a drive. Those things were not Andrew Thacker's fault. That was not scheme. That was execution. The fact they missed so many tackles gets back to fundamentals, and ultimately, I guess it lies on his feet because he's the defensive coordinator. But to me, I don't know that they were not out schemed on Saturday. That wasn't what the hell was going on the field. They just couldn't get off the field on third down. And so when you do that over and over again, it it becomes a situation that's untenable. And he could not bring the magic that he had last year for whatever reason, and I don't know what that is. And I think Andrew Thacker's a fine defense coach. There's been plenty of guys who've been fired here that have gone other places and done well. Dave Womack, who was the one I brought up earlier today, that went to Ole Miss. He was like a high school coach for a couple of years after he got fired from Georgia Tech, then ended up at Ole Miss and did a great job. Nate Woody's another one, got let go in the transition. Ted Roof said, like, he's had more lives than a cat. And I think he's not a very good defensive coordinator and keeps getting jobs. So I think Thacker's better than a lot of those dudes, but it just wasn't working. Sometimes it doesn't work, man. You might love somebody and the relationship doesn't work out. Like, that's life. Sometimes things don't work out. Do you think there was tension in the locker room between Kevin Shearer and Andrew Thacker? No, I think they're both professional dudes. Shearer's a good old country guy. I actually got to know him a little bit through like some weird circumstances over the last year, like running into him in the press boxes and stuff, because he'll sometimes stay up in the box if it's too difficult. He's like bad knees or something. So like at Ole Miss, you have to go like 2 miles or something to get to the locker room from the press box. So he's hung out up there and got to talk to him a little bit, or during the rain delay of the South Carolina State game. And I met him, got to spend time with him over the summer. Really enjoyed my time with him. He's just a good old boy. I don't think he's the backstabbing dude. Do you feel like the lack of screen passes and draw plays is a reflection on the O-line? And why no screen pass steps? They did try a couple screens. They were blown up pretty badly, where there was one where Haynes had to like pump fake the ball to let the D-line fly past him and then throw the screen. Maybe that was the one Malik scored on. They're not blocking very well. So when you throw those screen passes, they've not been incredibly effective. What I've been more bothered by is things like quick slants or like crossing routes. We haven't seen much of any of those quick throws, and I don't know why that is. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity. And maybe the guys are not. They're bouncing like the one that bounced off of Trey Cooley. They got picked off. I don't know what it is, but they're not super comfortable running that stuff with this group. The offense in general is inconsistent. I understand the rhyme or reason in many of the plays. They're very like predictable. Running the dive on first down. This might be just RPO gives. I don't know, but they're running like 80% of the time on first down and running like kind of straight down the middle, not stretches or anything to try to get outside either, not even like pulling. I don't know what that is about. Like, I don't know if that's just they're so RPO heavy or what. What is offensive identity? Because 5 games in, I have no idea. Some guy said Pyron, Singleton, Hayes. I don't know who Hayes is. There's Haynes. There's 2 Haynes. There's Haynes King and Jamal Haynes for going to transfer out. I think Zach Pyron, like, I would not be surprised if he left. If he can graduate in the summer, which he might be able to, it would not shock me in this day and age, but you also see him sticking around. He's just a redshirt freshman right now. Eric Singleton, they're going to have to get some NIL money together to make that one happen. Jamal Haynes, I don't know where he would go that would make a lot of sense for him. This is a very specific fit in terms of offense. He would be wise to stick with something that's working if he's playing. If you're talking about Haynes King, I don't see him going anywhere. The Mola guy won't see the field after the comments. Why would he not see the field? He spoke honestly. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People should be judged based on speaking their mind. He said what a lot of people were thinking probably and what was reality. So why would you punish that kid for saying that? He was honest about why he thought they lost the game. Why would you not play him? That's the one take that I've seen that's probably the dumbest take I've seen on social media or JOL or whatever, that Paul Mile is a bad teammate for speaking his truth or whatever. That's bullshit. I'd love to have Charles Kelly back. I don't know if he'd be willing to take the risk. Charles' defense has not looked very good at Colorado. They've given up a lot of points. I love Charles Kelly. I'd love to have him back. Great dude, friend to this day. I'm sure Brent would love to have him if there was an opening on the staff and it made sense. I just don't know that he's shown anything as a defense coordinator of late that would make you super excited to bring him in as a DC at least. What do you think the team can do to get this turned the right way? I'm guessing what you're asking. Just go ahead and execute, tackle people, play football. They hung with an Ole Miss team that's pretty good. They hung with a Louisville team that's, I think, pretty good. They can play well. They showed it at Wake Forest. Go down to Miami and play okay. I think you've got a shot there. You got to affect Tyler Van Dyke, and you've got to tackle people and get them to the ground and then score some points, and you have a shot. They've played them pretty well the last few years anyways. I don't know that Miami's made this huge leap up. They've just stopped screwing themselves over with their own mistakes. That's being dysfunctional on offense. But they were in a shootout a few years ago down there. So, and that was with a terrible offense. So I don't know that they're, I'm looking at them like they're Alabama or something. I don't see it yet. Anything on Jamie Felix and why he isn't playing? He was not dressed on Saturday, which was interesting. He's been dressed the last few games. He was on the scout team at one point. I don't really know what's going on there. I'm not using my magic bullet on the fourth string running back who has not done anything on the field to make me feel like he should be like a guy that everyone's talking about is going to be, one of the top 3 running backs. Just haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in the spring. I haven't seen it in practices. I haven't seen it on the field last year when he played. So a guy that was tremendously talented in high school just has not turned it on yet. This could turn out to be the UL Monroe game for Saban. I hope so. I hope for Brent's sake it is. I want to see Brent do well. Does the BG loss hurt in recruiting? No, I don't think that hurts in recruiting. I think not going to a bowl game will, and if they don't play well the rest of the season, it hurts. A lot of these kids view this as like, look, man, I can go in and start at position X, Y, or Z because I'm better than these dudes. Look at how bad they're struggling. They don't view it the way they don't. Recruits generally don't view stuff the way fans do, and I don't know how to reiterate this enough. If you're like god awful, like winning 1-2 games, yes, that's a problem. If you're like hanging with Ole Miss and Louisville and beating teams like Wake Forest, and you win some other games, they're not going to bail on you. Scooter says my Overreaction Sunday is elite. What's the latest on Chase Lane? Chase Lane, they're expected back this week. He was not dressed on Saturday, but was there. I haven't set it up to have Russell on here yet. I need to figure that out technology-wise. Eric Singleton's dad's on Twitter telling people he's not going anywhere for whatever it's worth. Yeah, he would be dumb. There's a long list of guys that it hasn't worked out for that have left. Brent Key can tell them the story of a Marion Brown. Let's see, how's a Marion Brown doing this year at South Carolina? Marion Brown tied Calvin Johnson's record with 7 touchdowns his first year at Georgia Tech. He had 21 catches for 400 yards, basically, and 7 touchdowns. In his entire now 1, 2, 3 years at South Carolina, he is not – in 3 years, he's barely eclipsed his catch total and has not eclipsed his yardage total and has yet to score a touchdown at South Carolina. It doesn't. The grass ain't always greener. Ask Jemias Griffin, who's now sitting on the bench at Ole Miss, and was sitting on the bench at Oregon. Like if Jemias Griffin were at Georgia Tech right now, he'd be the starting running back and probably have had a 800-yard season at least. Sometimes it pays you more to stay where you are and get noticed. Plenty of people, if you're good enough, people will notice you. It's different if you're Jahmyr Gibbs and you're a generational talent. Eric Singleton's a talented dude. He's not there yet. This seems like an O'Leary move. How often do you think Key talks to him? Coach O'Leary's around, so I'm sure he runs stuff by him. They're friends, and his mentor. So they're they're not not discussing this stuff. Put it that way. Zeke has gotten in the backfield but can't seem to make plays. It's been really frustrating. He's had some good games and some bad games. I think he's still a little raw. He's being much more disruptive, which is good to see. They got to finish. Him and Kyle Kennard probably both should have like 4 more sacks right now. They've both just kind of missed, not gotten their hands in the right place or not been able to close the play out or whatever. That's got to be frustrating as well. I'm going to wrap this up, folks. I appreciate everyone for joining me. We've gone over an hour. Hope you enjoyed the show. Tell your friends about it. They're Georgia Tech fans. Keep subscribing to Jackets Online. Tell your friends about it. And thanks everyone. And hopefully next week we're talking about upset and not Coral Gables and Miami Gardens, or the crappy Dolphin Stadium with the worst press box vantage in all of college football is.